Hello friends, welcome back to session 2 of our course on Introduction to AI and ML. The topic of today's discussion is going to be classification. Classification is an important concept and let's go ahead and see what it's all about. Okay, so last time before we broke off, we gave ourselves an assignment. Our assignment was briefly as follows. We were to observe people on a busy street or in a busy area and look at what they were wearing. Based on what they were wearing, we were to assign them to one of the following four groups which we had defined. So group A, group B, group C and group D defined here. We discussed last time, and our job was to assign each person to one of these groups based on their attire. We were also supposed to do a little bit more than this. We were also supposed to identify the unique attributes of majority of people in each group. So what were the characteristics of people in group A, majority of people in group A, which were not shared by B, C and D? Similarly, the attributes or characteristics of majority of people in group B that were not shared by members of other groups, and so on and so forth. That was the assignment. We also told ourselves that there would be no right or wrong answers. Clearly, we would all be doing these assignments at different locations, and all we had to do was honestly report our observations. So that was the assignment. हमने पहले लेक्चर में एक असाइनमेंट दी थी. हमें किसी भीड़ वाली जगह जाके लोगों को देखना था और हर व्यक्ति को इन चार में से एक ग्रुप में असाइन करना था. उन्होंने जो कपड़े पहने होंगे उसके हिसाब से. और फिर ये ग्रुप्स बनाने के बाद हमें हर ग्रुप की विशेषता या कोई विशेष गुण ऐसा हो वो आइडेंटिफाई करना था जो हर ग्रुप के लिए यूनिक हो. मतलब ग्रुप ए की विशेषता जो हो वो ग्रुप बी के लोगों में या सी या डी के लोगों में न हो. ऐसी विशेषताएं हमें हर ग्रुप के लिए देखनी थी. ये हमारा असाइनमेंट था. ओके, सो let's sort of in the context of this assignment move forward. Before that, a lot of you may be wondering, why did we do this exercise, right? I mean, what was the purpose of this entire exercise? ये हमने क्यों किया? इसके पीछे क्या कारण था? Okay. The reason was as follows. We want to predict or guess or estimate. Okay, these three are sort of being synonymously used. Predict or guess or estimate what a person would wear. Okay, based on observing other characteristics or attributes. So we want to get an idea of what a person is likely to be wearing based on some other observed qualities of theirs. That was the intention of this exercise. Okay, हमें इसका अनुमान लगाना था कि एक आध व्यक्ति ने कौन से कपड़े पहने होंगे, और ये अनुमान हम लगाएंगे उसके कुछ और गुणों के बेसिस पे. ओके, उसके और कुछ विशेषताओं के बेसिस पे हम अनुमान लगाएंगे कि ये व्यक्ति ने कौन से टाइप के कपड़े पहने होंगे. ये पर्पस था एक्सरसाइज का. ओके, who would be interested in such an exercise? Let me give some examples. This is not an entirely meaningless exercise. For example, a clothing manufacturer would be interested in something like this. A clothing manufacturer would definitely be interested in knowing the kind of attire people with certain characteristics are likely to wear, right? Similarly, an advertiser would be interested in knowing this. Now, last time I gave an example or an illustration where I said that perhaps you would observe that people who were smoking were most likely to be wearing a kurta pajama or be in group B. So if that was the case, an advertiser of either cigarettes or kurta pajamas would be interested in knowing this fact because they would know where to advertise their product. So this exercise is not an idle exercise. Okay, this exercise has has definite implications for a variety of people. That is the reason that we engaged in this exercise. We wanted to be able to predict the attire based on other characteristics or attributes of the person. Okay. This now brings us to the classification problem. Okay. So what is the classification problem? You had a person with certain attributes. You could call that person a data point. That's the technical jargon, or an input. Okay. And this person had to be assigned to one of multiple categories. We defined groups A, B, C, and D based on these attributes. Okay. And this assignment had an implicit element of prediction in it. Prediction. Okay. What do I mean by prediction? I mean that we obviously don't know what this person's attire is, but we are going to assign this person to one of these groups. We are going to predict that this person falls in one of these four groups based on other attributes. So we don't know his attire, but we are going to estimate or guess his attire or her attire and assign this person to one of these four groups based on some other attribute or based on some other observed attributes, right? These observed attributes are also called parameters. So this is the classification problem. Now our estimate or our prediction may be right or wrong. I mean, it need not be right always, but this is essentially the problem of classification. So the problem of classification is assigning a person or predicting the category of a person based on certain observed parameters. This is the classification problem. Just another technical sort of a view of the same thing. In classification, what you do is you input a data point to a model, an algorithm, or a processor, which then proceeds to predict the class or category in which that data point is likely to lie. Okay, so I'll go back to my previous slide. हम क्लासिफिकेशन प्रॉब्लम क्या है? क्लासिफिकेशन प्रॉब्लम यही है कि आपको इसका अनुमान लगाना है कि ये व्यक्ति इन चार में से कौन से कैटेगरी में, कौन से ग्रुप में होगा, और ये अनुमान हमें लगाना है उसके कुछ और एट्रीब्यूट्स के बेसिस पे. तो ये होता है क्लासिफिकेशन प्रॉब्लम. हमको पता नहीं है कि ये इस व्यक्ति ने कौन से प्रकार के का ड्रेस पहना है, लेकिन उसके बाकी के गुणों के बेसिस पे हम ये अनुमान लगाएंगे कि उस व्यक्ति ने किस प्रकार का ड्रेस पहना हुआ है. ये होगा क्लासिफिकेशन. ये एक टेक्निकल व्यू है जहां मैंने कहा कि एक डेटा पॉइंट इनपुट होता है किसी मॉडल या कंप्यूटर को और वो बताता है कि ये व्यक्ति कौन से क्लास में होगा. Okay. Why is classification important? Because many problems can be thought of as classification problems. So for example, if you were to predict the direction of stock prices, this could be thought of as a classification problem. There are two categories or two classes. Category 1 is where the stock price goes up. Category 2 is stock price falls, and you have to predict the stock price of tomorrow based on other parameters, and the other known parameters could be today's stock price, what happened to the company today, whether it signed up new clients, so on and so forth. So ये एक स्टॉक मार्केट की प्राइस ऊपर या नीचे जाएगी, ये जो प्रॉब्लम है ये एक प्रकार का क्लासिफिकेशन प्रॉब्लम है. Another example from a different area of a classification problem is estimating the level of or grade of an illness based on an X-ray or a CT scan. So the X-ray or CT scan is the input and the categories are different levels of the illness. तो ये एक मेडिकल फील्ड से एक एग्जाम्पल है क्लासिफिकेशन प्रॉब्लम का. Okay, now we come back to our problem of watching people in the street. Okay, So many of you may have sort of observed that the age and gender were the two attributes that were most likely to sort of have a bearing on what the person was wearing. So age and gender, these were the two attributes or the characteristics based on which you would have a fair chance of predicting what a person was wearing. So if the age and gender, right? So if a person was young and male, likely to be wearing a shirt, trousers, old and male, kurta pajama, old and female sari, and young and female another type of a dress. Now these, of course, there would be exceptions to this. This is not 100%, but by and large you may have imagined that this sort of was one possible way of predicting what people are wearing. तो यहाँ मैं बता रहा हूँ कि एज और जेंडर मतलब उसकी उम्र और महिला है या पुरुष है, इसके बेसिस पे शायद हम अनुमान लगा सकते हैं कि उस व्यक्ति ने किस प्रकार का ड्रेस पहना हुआ है. सो this is an example of attributes you could perhaps think of when you did your experiment of watching people on the street. Now let me say this: if you came up with this answer, age and gender, and if you sort of predicted the attire based on age and gender, you would get 0 marks. It's a fair answer, but I will explain to you at the end of at the end of this session why you do not get too much credit for coming up with this. Okay, so this is a flowchart implementation of what we just said. So essentially, given a person, you first identify the gender, break it up based on male and female. Okay, and in each of these categories you look at the age of the person and break it up into young and old, right? In females as well, young and old, and then this helps you identify the group or predict the group into which that person is likely to fall. So as you can see, if the person was male and young, he would fall in group A, likely to fall in group A. If it was a male and an older person, likely to be in group B. Similarly, if it was female and young, likely to be in group D, and a female and slightly advanced in years, likely to be in group C. तो इसे कहते हैं फ्लो चार्ट. फ्लो चार्ट में आप दो गटों में इसे डिवाइड करते हैं, मेल और फीमेल पहले, और उसके बाद उम्र के हिसाब से उनको डिवाइड करते हो, और इस प्रकार से आप अनुमान लगा सकते हो कि उस व्यक्ति ने क्या पहना हुआ है. इसे कहते हैं फ्लो चार्ट. Okay, so here is the flow chart solution to the classification problem. Okay, so you input a data point, okay, a data point or an input which is a combination of the person's gender and age. Okay, you input that to this flow chart, and then on the basis of this flow chart the computer decides what group the person is likely to lie in, and it predicts the class, basically class meaning the category, the group into which this person is likely to fall. So it essentially predicts the attire of the person based on gender and age, and the way the computer does it is by implementing this flowchart right here. Okay, so such type of a system has traditionally been called an expert system. Okay, it has also it's also called a rules based classifier. Okay, rules based classifier because we gave certain rules in the form of this flowchart, and the classification was done on the basis of those rules. Some people may call this an AI based system, but majority of the people are likely to say that this is not really an AI system. So what, according to these people, is an AI system? Let's see. Okay, so an AI system is a system where instead of telling the computer how to do the classification, you basically give the computer lots of examples. Okay, you call this training data, which is lot of examples, and the computer learns learns on the basis of these examples. Learns in the sense it identifies patterns in the examples that you gave. It identifies patterns in the examples you gave, and then when confronted with a fresh input, it uses this learning, it leverages this learning to predict the class of this fresh input. Okay, so this is what an AI system is. तो AI system में क्या होगा? AI system में flowchart नहीं रहेगा. AI सिस्टम में को हम नहीं बताएंगे कि ये क्लासिफिकेशन कैसे करना है. हम सिर्फ उसे एग्जाम्पल्स देंगे. एग्जाम्पल्स, इस एग्जाम्पल्स को ट्रेनिंग डेटा कहा जाता है. और इस एग्जाम्पल्स के बदौलत कंप्यूटर अपने आप सीख लेगा, अपने आप पैटर्न्स आइडेंटिफाई करेगा, और फिर जब आप उसको कोई नया इनपुट देते हो तो उसके लर्निंग के बेसिस पे, आधार पे वो उसे क्लासिफाई कर सकेगा किसी नए इनपुट को. मतलब बता सकेगा कि किस कैटेगरी में ये दूसरा इनपुट चला जाएगा. तो ट्रेनिंग होता है, और ट्रेनिंग होने के बाद क्लासिफिकेशन ये एआई सिस्टम कर सकती है. अभी ये कैसे होता है ये हम बाद में देखेंगे. How does this happen? I mean, how does a system actually learn, etc., etc.? That is going to be the topic of several of our sessions going forward. Okay, so I will sort of spend a few more minutes talking about training and so on and so forth of an AI system. So when I said lots of examples and training data, what I meant was essentially this. So you would perhaps give it a table of age, gender, and the group. Okay, so the attire, and you would feed this data to the computer, and the computer would then learn or essentially identify patterns based on these training examples. Okay, and after the training was complete, you could give the age of a person and the gender which it had not seen before. This would be a fresh input, an priorly unseen input, and ask the computer what is likely to be the attire of that person, and the computer, based on the training it has already had, would predict that, for example, a person whose age was 27 and gender was female is most likely to be in group D. And this is not on the basis of the flowchart, but on the basis of the examples that it had seen earlier. Right? So this would be the deployment of an AI system. Okay, so very important difference. An expert system is where you tell the system how to classify and the system does it. Okay, the system basically does what you tell it to do. It implements the flowchart, it implements the algorithm. And in an AI system, on the other hand, you only give examples. You don't tell the system what it's supposed to do. And the system figures out on its own how to classify a new input or an unseen input based on what it has learned. Okay, so this is the big difference between an expert system and an AI system. And this is where the entire concept of learning, etc., comes in for AI systems. So हिंदी में अगर बताना हो तो मैं 2 स्लाइड्स पीछे जाता हूँ. ये एक ट्रेनिंग डेटा का एग्जाम्पल है जहाँ हमने पूरा डेटा दिया हुआ है उस व्यक्ति की, कई व्यक्तियों की उम्र, और महिला है या पुरुष है वगैरह वगैरह, और वो किस ग्रुप में है, उन्होंने क्या पहना है. ये डेटा हम कंप्यूटर को फीड करेंगे. कंप्यूटर अपने आप से सीख जाएगा कि ये क्या चीज़ हो रही है, और उसे अगर हम किसी नए व्यक्ति के बारे में, नए व्यक्ति की उम्र बताएंगे और अगर महिला है या पुरुष है वो बताएंगे, तो कंप्यूटर उसी हिसाब से आपको बता देगा कि उस व्यक्ति ने पहना क्या है. तो ये बड़ा डिफरेंस है एक्सपर्ट सिस्टम्स में और एआई सिस्टम्स में. एक्सपर्ट सिस्टम्स में आप कंप्यूटर को बताते हो कि उसने किस तरह से क्लासिफिकेशन करना है, लेकिन एआई सिस्टम को आप सिर्फ एग्जाम्पल्स देते हो, आप सिर्फ उदाहरण देते हो, और सिस्टम अपने आप सीख लेती है कि उसको क्या करना है. ओके, so this is the difference. To summarize, in this conversation we sort of understood what the classification problem was. It's an important category of AI problems, and we also sort of understood what an AI system really was, and contrasted it with the idea, or the older idea of expert systems. So that was the summary of this session. Okay, I told you that I will tell you why. I told you that I will tell you why if you guessed age and gender as the attributes, you really wouldn't get too much credit for it. And the reason is as follows. Okay, if you are in the field and if you are taking readings, you're doing observations, your observations have to be non-obvious, okay, to be of great value. Obvious observations are not of great value, and therefore you really don't get credit for something that can, that's sort of logical, or which something that you can think of. Your observations have immense value if they are non-intuitive. That's the takeaway over here. तो अगर आपने ऐसी कुछ चीज़ कही जो मैं घर बैठे बैठे सोच सकता हूँ, तो उसके लिए मैं आपको क्यों पैसा दूँ या आपको क्यों क्रेडिट दूँ, राइट? अगर आप कोई आश्चर्यजनक बात मुझे बताते हो, तो उसे उसके लिए वैल्यू है, उसके लिए मैं आपको कुछ दे सकता हूँ. So always while taking readings or observations, don't try to focus on the obvious. Also try and dig in for things that may not be immediately obvious or seem logical. Okay, so that's the last word. Thank you, friends. That's all for today, and I will take your leave. Please feel free to ask questions or put your comments, and do subscribe to this channel if you're sort of liking it or getting the hang of it. Bye bye.